Hey, welcome back to the Job Site, fam. I'm Max Soul.
And I'm Mello Soul.
And we're opening up the blueprints for Season 2, Episode 11. And today, we're talking about a group that didn't just change music. They engineered a global dynasty. And we're deconstructing the Jackson 5.
And look, when we talk about the Jackson 5, people see the afros and the purple bell-bottoms.
Little peace sign.
Yeah, but they miss the industrial infrastructure. The story starts in Gary, Indiana, in a house no bigger than a garage at 2300 Jackson Street.
Yes, and to understand that Jackson 5 blueprint Mello, well, you have to look at a broken guitar string and a father who saw a way out of the furnace. Joe Jackson didn't just decide his kids were going to be an act. He realized they were a precision tool that could cut through the poverty of Gary, Indiana.
Yes, Max. Joe Jackson was a crane operator, but his heart was in the blues.
Isn't all of our hearts in the blues?
Exactly. He played guitar in a band called the Falcons, and he kept his prized Gibson guitar in the closet strictly off limits to the kids. Sounds familiar, Max.
Sure does, Mello. It's a familiar string, which we'll get into in a few. But first, back to the boys. So the story is that Tito would sneak the guitar out while Joe was at the mill. And one day, Tito snapped a string. God, this is sounding familiar.
Very familiar.
So anyway, Tito tried to hide it, but Joe found out and was ready to inspect Tito with his belt. Wouldn't have been the first time either, but Tito cried out, "I can play!"
So just like any father would do, Joe challenged him.
Hell yeah.
Oh, yeah, and again in a familiar string, Max.
Sure is, Mello.
Well, Tito played, and the other brothers started harmonizing with his playing.
Now that's new.
Well, damn, Joe thought these kids have got something.
He sure did, Mello. Joe realized right then and there that the natural resources under his roof were more valuable than the steel in the mill that he worked at. It's pivot time, Soul Fam. He put that belt down, well, at least for the moment, and then he picked up that manager's clipboard. And here is where we point out that a very similar thing happened to Bobby Womack and his brothers and their dad Friendly's guitar. Same issue, same result. So if you get a chance, go back to Season 1, Episode 23 on Bobby's story and check it out.
You know, it's funny, Max. Both dads were construction workers and guitar players.
Yeah, with kids who weren't allowed to touch the guitar either. But the lure of the instrument is powerful, apparently more so than the belt. Joe didn't look at music as art. He looked at it as athletics because he'd been a boxer. He brought ring discipline to the rehearsals. He had a gymnasium mentality. And the story is that Joe, as we know, would sit in the chair in the middle of the tiny living room, and rehearsals would go on for 5 or 6 hours after the kids got home from school. And if the brothers wanted to go outside and play baseball with the neighborhood kids, Joe would point to the instruments. And he'd famously say, "You can play ball when you're rich." In his mind, he was building mental stamina as much as musical talent.
Theirs was a Sears and Roebuck infrastructure. In the beginning, they didn't have high-end gear. They were the architects of the budget build.
It's so true, Mello. Their first amplifiers were often just old radios they'd rewired. And then Joe eventually brought them equipment from Sears. And on credit, too, might I add. So he had a hustle to make those payments.
And to pay off the gear, Max? Well, Joe booked them into every Chitlin Circuit dive bar and strip club in the Midwest. Imagine a 10-year-old Michael singing "I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You" while people were throwing dollar bills onto the stage in a Smoky Gary nightclub.
Can you imagine that? That was a huge lesson, Mello, because it gave them battlefield awareness. So by the time they hit Motown, well, they weren't scared of any stage because they'd already performed in the toughest rooms imaginable.
That's some steel mill foundation, Max.
Sure is, Mello.
Joe Jackson, being a construction guy, brought that heavy machinery discipline into the living room. It wasn't a hobby. This was a manufacturing project.
Yep, Mello, and here comes the belt. Because Joe, he sat in that kitchen chair with that belt, and if you missed a step or flattered a note, the inspection was immediate. No participation trophies in this house.
Think about the pressure, Max. Stress tested they were before the world ever saw them. Joe used to tell them, if you can't impress the kids gathered outside our window on the block, then you'll never impress the world. That's a lesson for every upcoming artist today. Technical perfection is the baseline. If you aren't disciplined in the living room of your craft, you'll fold under the stadium lights.
It was about performance architecture, because they weren't just talented kids. They were being forged into these precision engineers. They learned that your work ethic is the structural steel that keeps the building standing when the fame starts to shake the ground.
And on that note, we're going to take a little break.
That's right. You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back.
Don't go away. Hey, welcome back to Architects of Soul. Before we dive into the Motown era, if you like this content, please give a like and subscribe to our channel. And remember, there's a video version available on our YouTube page if you feel like watching instead of just listening.
That's right. So, it's 1967, Mello, and the J5 hit the Apollo Theater Amateur Night. And I could truly attest to that after being there and either being behind the console at front of house in that theater or playing guitar in the amateur night band on a few occasions. And let me tell you, that stage was a gladiator pit. And the audience, well, Mello, if you weren't elite, that crowd would eat you alive. And I mean eat you alive. The blues can start in an instant, and the change to the silence, and then the roar. Well, it's something you had to be there to feel back in the day before it became a corporate house. It was unreal.
Well, Joe Jackson brought his kids there to get proof of concept, Max.
He couldn't have picked a better place.
Right. How good were they really? He knew how good they really were, but the Apollo was the litmus test of litmus tests. In Joe's mind, the Apollo was the ultimate structural stress test.
Oh, it totally was. Two things about the amateur night that were monuments in this theater were the log that you would rub for luck and Sandman Sims, who the audience revered and was famous for the Sandman sweep, where he'd literally sweep you off the stage with a broom if you were mediocre. Man, I got very lucky to spend some time with him at work on the show. And he was just a sweet man who really loved his Apollo crowd with all his heart. But he wouldn't hesitate to sweep you off if you couldn't cut it, Mello. Now, back to the Jacksons.
Well, so the situation, Max, is that the Jackson Five were the last act of the night on Amateur Night. And they had been traveling in a cramped van from Gary, Indiana, and they were exhausted. And Michael was only 9 years old, remember that?
That's correct. Joe Jackson knew that they couldn't just sing Mello. And only one shot for them here. So they had to provide an architectural shock. And Joe told Michael, don't just give him the voice, give him the king. And when the curtain rose, the Apollo crowd was already restless. It's getting late, a lot of acts. You know, if they're that good and they're last, how good could they really be? You know, typical amateur night vibes. The boys come out. And they start into this high-octane version of James Brown's Guy Got the Feeling. And Michael starts into his JB routine. And Mel, let me tell you, he doesn't just mimic James. He digitized him. He did the rapid-fire footwork, the knee drops, the iconic mic stand catch with such technical accuracy that Sandman stayed backstage. Man, that says a lot right there, because my man was always ready when the audience spoke and said, no way.
And let's just talk about the Apollo hush in that room.
Oh, man, that was the silence of death.
Right. And the legend has it that the room went from noisy to dead silent in the first 30 seconds.
Yep. That's when they picked you and decided whether you could cut it or not.
Yeah, because that hardened Harlem crowd couldn't believe a 9-year-old had that much rhythmic authority. By the time he hit the final ha, the room exploded.
That's right. I've been witness to that, Mello. Sometimes it's the start of an amazing ride, and after the crowd went nuclear, well, the Jacksons won the first prize. But this wasn't a trophy. It was a validation of the blueprint, because back in that time, there was absolutely no better accolade than that. Winning at the Apollo Theater meant you were certified. It was a stamp of approval that forced Motown and the big city promoters to realize that the steel mill discipline from Gary was the real deal.
Right, Max. And Michael realized that night that if he could conquer the Apollo, he could conquer any room on the planet. He learned that technical mastery silences the doubters. That win caught the attention of the greats. We talk about the Gladys Knight string, which is
season 2, episode 6, y'all.
Yeah. Well, she was one of the first to push Motown to sign them.
But Motown's marketing machine naturally claimed it was Diana Ross who discovered them, just to give them that star pedigree. Mm-hmm. But in reality, it was Bobby Taylor of the Vancouvers, along with Gladys, who pushed Berry Gordy to sign them. And if you didn't get a chance to watch it, you should. Season 2, episode 6, y'all. Mm-hmm. All right, back to the Jackson 5. Shameless plug out of the way. Anyway, once the Jacksons got to Detroit and they entered the Motown Assembly Line, well, Berry Gordy didn't just give them a producer. He built the corporation and trademarked the name as well.
Right. The corporation, Max, was a specialized hit-making team of Berry Gordy, Alfonso Mizell, Freddie Perrin, and Deke Richards. They were the first group in history to have their first 4 singles hit number 1. Why? Because the quality control was relentless. During I Want You Back, Michael was forced to do hundreds of takes. Barry wanted every ooh and ah to have the same exact soul fire.
Oh, he sure did, Mello. And the Motown Assembly Line was never more relentless during the recording of I Want You Back. And to understand how an 11-year-old Michael Jackson handled that pressure, you have to look at it like Barry was squeezing coal to make a diamond. Barry didn't just want a hit. He wanted to manufacture a perfect frequency. Those legendary sessions recorded at Motown Studio A, which they called the Snake Pit, really were a snake pit.
Mm-hmm. So the corporation, Barry, Alfonso, Freddie, and Deke, had spent months engineering the track, but they needed the vocal foundation to be indestructible.
Well, it's about the timbre, Mello. like we always say, if the timbre ain't working, neither is the song. And as an engineer, I totally and completely agree with it. It's a requirement. But Berry was obsessed with the grain in Michael's voice. He didn't want Michael to just sound like a kid. He wanted him to sound like a soul veteran with the energy of a lightning bolt.
So it became a marathon. Michael was kept in the booth for hours, recording the lead vocal over and over. We aren't talking about 10 or 20 takes. We're talking about hundreds of iterations of the same lines. Most kids would have folded under that kind of corporate audit, Max, but Michael had been heat-treated in the Gary living room rehearsals.
Yep, Mello, Joe in a chair with a belt in his hands, ready to strike at the smallest mistake. Sounds about right. Mm-hmm. During the oohs and the ahs, Gordy would stop the tape and say, "No, Michael, the ooh in the first verse doesn't match the ooh in the bridge. Do it again." And the disciplined Michael, well, he didn't complain or throw a tantrum. He treated the microphone like a precision tool. Because of Joe Jackson's discipline, Michael had a mechanical memory. He could recall the exact placement of his tongue and the exact pressure of the breath from a take that he did 3 hours earlier. An amazing talent he was, Mello. Absolutely amazing.
And the most famous part of I Want You Back, Max, is the breakdown where Michael grunts and ad-libs. Even those spontaneous moments were calculated. Gordy and the corporation made Michael record those spontaneous grunts dozens of times until he had the right rhythmic velocity.
Yeah, spontaneous, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. Or until Berry really was satisfied with whichever came first, and usually probably wasn't what they wanted, it was what Berry wanted. Mm-hmm. But Michael learned that in the architecture of a hit, there is no such thing as good enough. Everything, even the breaths, must be intentional. The lesson for R&B artists today is about bespoke infrastructure. Motown marketed them as Diana Ross's Discovery Mello, and to give them the star pedigree, but the reality was pure sweat equity. They proved that youth soul wasn't a novelty. Is a dominant market force, and they forced the industry to realize that kids could have the vocal discipline of a 40-year-old vet.
It's about the aesthetic of the spectacle, Max. Joe made sure their costumes, the fringe, the sequins weren't just clothes. They were tools of the trade designed to amplify every move. They weren't just singing songs, they were building a visual brand that translated across the globe.
No, they sure were, Mello, big time. And that translates to us taking a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to pull out the Jackie Wilson string.
We're kicking it with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we're into the Jackson 5 today, so stay with us.
Hey, welcome back to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul.
Okay, Max, so we got to pull the Jackie Wilson string. Season 1, episode 9, y'all. People see Michael snap and think it just happened. No, Michael was reverse engineering Mr. Excitement.
Yep, Mel, he was. The Jackie Wilson string is not just a story of influence. Man, it's a story of industrial espionage. Because Michael wasn't just a fan. He was a vocal and visual auditor. And he treated Jackie Wilson as a living textbook for how to weaponize a stage.
So while the other brothers might have been hanging out in the dressing room or joking around backstage, Max, a 9-year-old Michael was usually found in the wings, which is the side of the stage hidden by the heavy velvet curtain.
Right, and I was behind that curtain so many times. Yeah. I can't even tell you. And thinking about being behind that curtain and all the people that were there way before me and before I got there is daunting.
And Michael was technical note-taking. He wasn't watching for entertainment. He was watching the mechanics.
Yeah, they say his focus was laser-like as a kid, man. He'd be standing there and he'd stare. In any act that had anything going, he'd be watching. But Jackie was the man. And you see, Soul Fam, Jackie Wilson was famous for the knee drop and the slide. So Michael would watch Jackie's feet and count the beats. He noticed that Jackie would use a suit jacket as a visual amplifier, flipping it to make a turn look faster than it actually was. One time, Jackie Wilson caught the kid watching him with such intensity that he stopped and asked, "What you looking at, little Mike?" Mike didn't say he liked the song. Instead, he asked about a specific foot plant Jackie had used during a spin. Jackie realized right then that this kid was deconstructing his blueprint.
Okay. Imagine being Jackie and watching this little kid was something special. Jackie Wilson was a former Golden Gloves boxer, and his stage show was built on athletic explosiveness. And Michael realized that to reach that level, he had to train like an athlete, not just a singer. Michael noticed that Jackie would shadow box before going on stage to get his heart rate to the exact performance frequency.
Yeah, just up a little above normal so that energy was flowing from the second Jackie hit the stage. And here, Mello, is where we see the young artist architect at work. Michael took that ring discipline back to Gary. I mean, his father obviously did have that same ring mentality we talked about in the first segment. He began practicing his spins until he could do them with the same centrifugal force as Jackie, but with that added precision of the Motown Assembly Line. Jackie Wilson had a way of crying through a note, too, a rhythmic sob or a hiccup that added raw emotion to a polished song. And Michael realized that, man, this wasn't just a feeling, it was a technical tool. He learned that the flaws in a vocal, the grunts and the gasps, are actually the structural support that makes the soul sound feel urgent.
Exactly, Max. So Michael began to experiment with those same sharp intakes of breath, the Jackie Wilson filter. So if you listen to I Want You Back or ABC, you can hear those little ooh, ooh hiccups and sharp gasps that are direct vocal spec lifted from Jackie Wilson's playbook. Michael took Jackie's analog soul and digitized it for the 70s.
Exactly, Mello. He saw Jackie doing things like using that tuxedo jacket like a prop, as we were talking about before. It made his spin look faster, and flipping his jacket over his shoulder accentuated his turns. And, well, Michael took all of that. He took it all in and turned it into the most iconic stage movements in history. Taking all that visual architecture he saw in Jackie, and he built the whole Jackson 5 stage show around it. Man, he realized that the look has to match the sound at 100% capacity.
And that's the peer lesson for the new vibe. Be a student of the craft. Michael didn't just feel his way to being the greatest. He studied the greatest. He took Jackie Wilson's excitement and used it as the foundation for a dynasty.
And I would guess that every time Jackie saw Michael practicing in the hallway at the Apollo, he would just think to himself, man, that kid is a sponge. And that's some lesson for our peers today. Study the masters. Don't just feel the music. Learn the source code. Michael didn't want to be good. He wanted to be the next version of the greatest. And man, he took Jackie's excitement and used it as a foundation for the entire Jackson dynasty.
It's about energy management. Jackie Wilson was a high-voltage wire that eventually burned out. Michael saw that and realized he had to build a system that could sustain that level of intensity for a lifetime and not burning out. He took the athlete of soul blueprint and added industrial longevity.
That's right, Mel. Michael's work ethic was a lock, and he showed that professional precision attention throughout his life and career. We all know that because he was absolutely on it. On everything, and from the single note to the single move. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
That's right. You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul.
Stay with us. Thanks for tuning in to Architects of Soul. Our music is waiting for you. Hey, welcome back to Architects of Soul. Well, it's 1975, Mello, and the brothers were grown men, and they wanted to be the general contractors of their own sound. So the solo career standoff at Motown is the ultimate case study in corporate zoning.
It was, Max. To Berry Gordy and the Motown Corporation, the Jackson 5 weren't just five brothers. They were a unified architectural unit.
Yeah, sounds like Berry, don't it? You know, the funny thing is, and we've talked about this before, Berry didn't treat his people like artists. He treated them like assets.
Absolutely. And it seems like fear was Berry's best friend.
You think?
And the fear said to Berry, if you pull one brick out, Michael, the whole skyscraper might collapse. And Gordy wasn't about to let his most profitable building be demolished for a solo project.
Oh, no. Berry Gordy? I don't think so.
No. And so by 1971, Max, Michael was already the biggest star in the world, but Motown's contracts were designed to keep the J5 brand at the forefront.
That's right, Mello. And as we know, Berry Gordy believed in the assembly line. He'd seen what happened when Diana Ross left the Supremes. It created a vacuum. He didn't want Michael Jackson and a Jackson 5. He wanted a centralized monopoly.
So they did the solo tease.
Right?
The brothers realized that as long as they were in Detroit, they were tenants, not homeowners. They were paying for the building with their talent, but Motown held the title to the land.
Motown did release solo albums for Michael. Don't get us wrong. But even then, when Michael did record solo hits like Ben and Got to Be There, well, he was essentially a subcontractor. The corporation, Berry, would have Michael go into the booth, sing the lines exactly as the corporation, Berry, dictated, and leave. He had zero say in the arrangements, the mix, or the marketing.
And of course, Jermaine. Jermaine. Who Motown tried to appease by giving him a bit more solo real estate, but even that was a calculated move to keep him tied to the building. Since he was married to Berry's daughter, Hazel.
Big thing right there.
Yeah, he was part of the family firm.
Yeah, Berry probably put a shotgun in his back.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he was family now and part of the firm, but it still was a strictly work for hire extension of the group. And so Michael had zero creative control over the material, and Jermaine had zero creative control over the material. They were simply the voice.
Voices, yeah.
Right, but Motown was the architect, and thus started the creative sovereignty conflict.
Ooh, and as these brothers grew into their late teens, they kept building on their own blueprints, writing songs in their basement at Havenhurst and bringing them to Motown.
Whose plan was, as we said before, rejection. The Jacksons even sat down with Berry Gordy and the producers to present their own songs.
And of course, the response was a hard no, Max.
Yeah, like we didn't see that coming.
Right. Motown's policy was that the quality control department handled the writing and the artists simply handled the singing.
Yeah, during one meeting, Joe Jackson pushed for the boys to produce themselves, and a Motown executive reportedly told them, "You're the singers, we're the thinkers. You just keep dancing and let's handle the hits." The world of Berry Gordy and Motown.
Yeah.
How many times have we seen this string, Mello?
Pretty much with almost all the artists in Berry's fight-or-flight world.
Exactly.
Tension reached a breaking point when the brothers realized that despite selling millions of records, they didn't own a single brick of their legacy.
Can you fucking imagine that?
Yeah, from Motown, yes.
Unbelievable. I mean, and that really pretty much says it all, doesn't it, Mello? I mean, emergency exit time. Gotta go. And in 1975, the group decided it was time, and they jumped ship to Epic CBS. Naturally, Motown dropped the hammer. There's a new one for you, right?
Yeah.
Not. They informed the brothers that, wait for it, that the name, the Jackson 5, was a trademark owned by Motown. Oh, my Lord. Where did we hear that before? Hello, Gladys? I got to talk to you. Anyway, if they left, they had to leave their identity behind.
And here's where the story hits its fracture. It gets heavy. Because as we said before, Jermaine Jackson was married to Berry Gordy's daughter, Hazel.
Leverage, if you ask me.
Yeah, and he felt a dual loyalty to the Motown infrastructure and the family.
Yeah, so he was caught between a rock and a hard place, Mello. Jermaine stayed behind, forcing the brothers to replace him with the youngest brother, Randy, and rebrand the Jacksons and doing the unthinkable, walking away from the most powerful label in black music. But Jermaine stuck.
Yeah, that's the Masters Rebellion. They left the name Jackson 5 behind because Motown owned it, and they were willing to trade their famous brand for creative sovereignty.
That's right. Off they go to CBS Epic, and then went straight to Gamble and Huff. Season 1, episode 14, y'all. At Philadelphia International to rebuild that skyscraper at Sigma Studios. And here it comes, y'all. You thought we forgot, huh? Well, we didn't. Because if you're feeling this story of independence,
and if you're sipping what we're pouring,
right? If you want to eat what we're feeding you, please give us a like and subscribe, and a comment would be excellent. Also, we'd really love to hear from you guys. And remember, we got the full visual breakdown over on our YouTube page. So if you want to see the blueprints in action, you can. Okay, let's get back to the Jackson 5 family. Our shameless promotional moment is over.
It's over. Okay, well, for the Jacksons, Max, Philly was the Reconstruction era. Gamble and Huff helped them transition from boys to men.
Oh, is that a joke?
Right. On tracks like Show You the Way to Go, they used the Sigma sound to give the brothers a more sophisticated orchestral foundation. But the real lesson to look at here is sacrifice.
And exactly, and that takes us back to Jermaine, because he stayed at Motown because of his marriage to Hazel Gordy. He took the hit, but the family foundation cracked. Randy replaced them. Now they're the Jacksons. As bad as that was for the Jacksons, well, it meant that they owned their masters, and they were writing their own songs on the Destiny and Triumph albums, and that meant they became the owners of the building, not just the tenants. They never looked back.
For every artist today, ownership is worth more than a brand name. Don't fall in love with the sign on the door.
No.
Fall in love with the title to the land.
Word.
Yeah, they prove that you can rebuild your empire from the ground up if your technical mastery is solid. The Rose by any other name, Max.
Yep, no, a name can be changed. It's what happens to the music that matters, and who owns what. And guess what that what was? It was their masters, and now they own them.
What a story, Max. These boys and the future wide open now.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, from being taught by the belt to owning it and the pants that go with them.
Right, and don't forget the shoes, because they definitely took them as well, Mello. And on that note, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to stick a stamp on this envelope and mail it out the door.
You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back, y'all.
So, Mello, This is only just the start of what this family will become in the music world. From the Gary Steel Mills to the Philly Skyscrapers, the Jacksons taught us that discipline is the only shortcut. They weren't just a group. They were a social infrastructure that changed how the world perceived black youth.
They taught us that you have to be a sponge for the greats like Jackie Wilson, but you have to have the grit to walk away from the table when they won't let you own your work.
You better believe it.
Yeah, they are indeed the architects of the self-contained dynasty.
And just for a second, Mello, imagine being Michael Jackson and having a suit tell you that your songs aren't Motown standard. Rejecting the brothers' blueprints because they wanted to keep them on the assembly line. What a fucking shit show that was.
Berry Gordy didn't just want artists, Max. He wanted assets.
We did talk about that last segment.
Sure did. He knew if they started writing their own hits, he couldn't control their market share anymore.
That's not making the money there, Thuster.
Exactly.
So exactly why they moved to Philly, and the move was so legendary. Because they traded the most famous name in music, the Jackson 5, just so they could be the general contractors of their own sound.
And here's the peer lesson.
Badass.
Yeah, but the peer lesson for the new vibe and anyone else's vibe, ownership is the only true freedom.
That's right, it is. They went to Philly, hooked up with Gamble and Huff to finally build the skyscraper their own way on the Destiny album. They proved the corporation wrong by becoming their own corporation. And guess what, Soul Fam? That corporation was a dynasty. And in that dynasty, they indeed became a huge force for some of the most wonderful music the world has ever fallen in love with. And as always, we want to close with our final thought and our hope for all of us, our art, our craft, and our creations.
Keep that soul fire burning, protect your sound, nurture your creativity, own your voice, and remember the lessons from the giants who came before.
And yes, protect your masters and seek out wise mentors who can guide you on your journey. And until next we meet, peace and soul, y'all.